A&B Properties is Quincy's largest apartment rental company with hundreds of units available. They offer short-term and long-term rentals with 1 up to 4-bedroom apartments. A&B Properties meets the needs of its tenants with care, compassion, and a quality of service that exceeds expectations. A&B Properties also has a convenient tenant app for you to do your payments or make repair requests. Give them a call today. A&B Properties, 217-919-8080, Quincy.
Okay, my guest today is Brennan Hills. Brennan, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to have you. I remember when you ran for mayor.
Yeah, been a minute now.
It's been a minute. And I'm going to ask a question that I asked in the green room because I just think it's really interesting.
Gotcha.
You are one of the few people in Quincy. I think Brittany Bowl went to both QHS and QND. And there's some other cool people out there that have done that.
Yeah.
But I asked you in the green room, can you repeat the answer? Because I actually was, I was getting texts while we were talking.
Yeah.
Trying to talk to Shane. But you went to both QND and QHS.
For sure.
And are they different from each other?
Yeah, so I did my freshman year at Quincy High School, and I did my sophomore and junior years at Notre Dame, and then I switched back to the public high school for my senior year. There's definitely differences. I would say you get a little bit more one-on-one attention at Notre Dame. They're a little bit more invested in each particular student, whereas you get a little bit more options at the public school. Notre Dame tries to do that same thing where they have the VOTEC program where you can leave class and attend some stuff at QHS, but overall your core classes are going to be a little bit more options at QHS.
When you say options,
Yeah.
Okay, so not that I've got no interest in disparaging either high school, and who would want to do that?
No.
But when you're talking about like the music program,
Right.
I know that QND has a good music program. I know they do because I went to school there and I saw the band play, and they're really good.
Yeah.
It's just that for some reason, students who like deeper values in art, music, theater, at QND you don't have like the theater building.
Yeah,
you don't
no,
have.
definitely
There's
not.
no like A building, B building. It's not like
No,
that. At
no.
senior high, they do.
Yeah.
It's almost segregated. I've heard.
Yeah.
Where some people who, if you're in theater, you may not even see those people.
Right, you're called an A building kid in QHS. If you are like in theater or do a lot of band stuff, etc. A building is where they have the theater and where they're going to practice for band, choir, etc. Whereas at Notre Dame, there is a choir classroom, but that's only staffed through half of the day. So that's the extent of their arts program, really. They have a band director in the morning, and I think they've got an art appreciation class now, but that wasn't even always the case.
So when did you leave? So you went to senior high and then
Yeah.
QND and then back to senior high?
Yep.
So was it kind of 50-50? Did you spend 2 years at one school, 2 years at the other?
Yeah. I did my entire freshman year at QHS. I did my entire sophomore, junior at QND, and then I did my entire senior year at QHS. So
Do you
I'm
feel
technically
like-
a QHS graduate, but spent a lot of time at both.
Do you feel like you spent more time at senior high or more time at QND?
I think I would say I spent more time at Notre Dame because the latter part of my experience at the high school, the public high school, was during COVID, and so that was just a very unique experience.
Okay.
I was online for a large portion of my senior year, but I would say that the last part of my junior year was also pretty much online because of COVID. That's really when it started, was my junior year.
What year approximately did you run for mayor?
I announced my candidacy in August of 2020.
2020. So
Yeah.
deep in the heart of COVID.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then you went to senior high.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, you were leaving class when I called you earlier. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, you got a second to talk?
Yeah.
What are you studying?
I actually just switched my major to sociology last week. My major was in history. My goal there was to teach high school history, I'm a little unsure about that path at this point, exploring things right now. So I went with sociology because it's a little more general and still can be applicable to the education field, whereas history kind of locked me into a path I wasn't 100% on.
How old are you?
21.
21.
Yep.
Congratulations on being 21.
Thank you.
Some people never get that far.
Cheers.
Oh, by the way, that Pink Whitney that was in that. Shane, did you see any of the Pink Whitneys? These little, like, Cosmo style bottles that you and I were, like, taking care of business when the cameras weren't rolling. That thing just hit me.
Okay.
So I feel like I'm going to get a little crazy right now.
That's all right.
So just get ready.
That's all right. You got to do what you got to do.
So, what is your opinion? We are going to go into some local politics. One of the things of your passions is local housing.
Yeah.
I told you that we're definitely going to cover that.
For sure.
But my first question to you isn't going to be like, why'd you run for mayor?
Yeah.
Because you know what? I mean, we all care. I care. But we're going to skip past that. I know why you want to be mayor.
Yeah.
I know why you want to be mayor. Because the reason why everybody wants to be mayor, you want to improve things.
Yeah,
you want
100%.
You want to work for your community.
For sure.
You know, you're seeking power, and you're like Darth Vader. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm joking. So you know, one thing, I did check out your Facebook page.
Okay.
And I looked at your cover page.
Yeah.
It's very rude to ask people who they're going to vote for.
Yes.
So I'm not going to ask you who you're going to vote for, because that's rude.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you why you're voting for Kamala Harris.
I gotcha. Yeah. So I am planning at this point in time, you know, anything can happen as we've seen over the last few weeks. But my plan is to cast a ballot for Kamala Harris.
So is it because of the coconut thing?
It is not because she is coconut pilled, as the youth would say.
What does this mean?
There is a viral video of Kamala Harris where she goes off on a tangent about falling out of a coconut tree. And it sort of went viral on TikTok. And around the same time, I'm big into music. I don't know if you are. I collect vinyl, and all of my tattoos are musically related. And I'm a big fan of Charlie XCX. She is like a pop diva. You might know I Don't Care, the song. I love it. I Don't Care.
I don't care.
Yeah. So that was a while ago. She's evolved, if you will, and put out an album this summer called Brat. So if you look at my Facebook cover page, it says Kamala is Brat with a little coconut on there.
Okay.
And Charlie XCX tweeted out Kamala is Brat, essentially an endorsement of Kamala Harris. And so that it's just like I support Kamala Harris in my generation's language.
Like on the Facebook, I was I usually don't creep on Facebook pages. But,
I hear you.
But when I'm podcasting with Brennan Hills, I do.
Okay, heard.
And so look, I go on there and someone goes, "What are you saying? I'm so confused, but I thought you liked her." And then the great Trish Santos said, "No, it's a compliment."
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's thoroughly a compliment.
So did you watch the DNC last night?
I watched every speech other than Barack Obama's. I did not watch that one. I went to bed, and that's just the way it was. I watched Michelle. I watched Bernie. I watched a little bit of Doug Emhoff.
Why would you skip Barack Husseino?
You know, I am going to watch it.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with really my policy disagreements, which are vast with Obama. But
Oh yeah, like the neocon thing, like droning and drone bombing children's hospitals.
Yeah, not cool at all. Not cool at all.
I mean, his middle name is Hussein. Don't be so hard on him.
Right. I don't know that that's really relevant, though.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's not. It's got nothing to do with it.
It does not.
It has to do with being a neocon.
It does, which I would say the vast majority of the current Democratic establishment are neocons.
The Democratic establishment?
Yeah, definitely. As well as the Republican
Shots
establishment.
fired, Brennan.
I mean, yeah, I speak truth to power. That's just the way it is.
Okay.
So when you fund wars like they are in with Israel right now, sending 2,000-pound bombs to be dropped on UN schools, hospitals, and ambulances, literally directly through a Red Cross ambulance, that's not acceptable to me, whether you are in a position of power in my party or not.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Yeah, so if RFK, if your party, so I don't have a party.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with you having a party.
I mean, and I would say I just align a little bit more with the Democratic Party. Rather than the Republican Party. But I would say most of my views are pretty independent.
Is it like because of the social stuff? Is that why you lean that way? It can't be. It can't be fiscal reasons.
I would say that it is definitely in part fiscal for sure.
Really?
I mean, like, yeah,
You,
definitely.
you want bigger government?
I don't like to define it that way because when you get into that, like, bigger government, what does that really mean? Because if you're a stereotypical Democrat, then you're going to say the Republicans are doing bigger government by getting inside of the hospital room with women and their doctors, right? And if you are a stereotypical Republican, you're going to say the Democrats are doing bigger government because they want to tax you more, right? So I don't really like that terminology because it doesn't actually mean anything. But if you talk about specific policy, then I can tell you whether I think the government should be more involved or not.
That's the smartest answer I've received in like the last 17 hours. And I've asked people those questions outside of this pod. So,
right.
So I'm a little disappointed that you skipped Obama's speech.
Well,
he's one of the greatest orators of our time. I'm
I
not
would
being
agree with that,
sarcastic.
yeah.
Not being sarcastic.
Yeah,
I
100%.
think Reagan. I was talking to Bob, and I'm like, yeah, man, like Reagan and Obama are like one of the two best orators of the modern age.
Yeah.
And Bob goes, yeah, I mean, what about Clinton? I'm like, okay, yeah, Bill Clinton, but I still put Reagan and Obama over Clinton. I think JFK was good.
Yep.
And now we're not necessarily in the modern age anymore. The 1960s.
yeah. I mean,
I don't know when modern age starts.
I would say because his debate was televised, that's pretty modern.
Okay, fair.
But I mean, the 60s also was, at this point, almost 100 years ago. Closer to 100 years than closer to 50.
Jeez,
So,
that's scary.
yeah.
So when you're looking at this election?
Yeah.
What are are you okay with an open border?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Why?
I don't know anyone who is okay with an open border.
I know people who are.
Okay. Well,
Like the
I don't
people
know
running
those
for
people.
president.
Like
No, I'm
who?
serious. No,
Yeah, go ahead,
I'm
go
being
ahead.
dead serious. Like I think the people running for president, like the
You think-
person running for president, Kamala. I think she is okay with an open border.
Yeah,
I do. And
totally
I
disagree.
pardon?
Yeah, I definitely would disagree with that, but go ahead.
That's fine. What I'm saying is like, when someone purposefully doesn't go to the border and it's open and they're looking at the videos,
Yeah.
or not looking at the videos or ignoring the videos, you're seeing these people pour across. It's millions and millions and
Unprecedented in the last few years.
Unprecedented. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm agreeing with you on that.
and I don't know if we can agree on the number of people because honestly, I cannot firmly tell you for a fact how many people have come across.
No.
But I think it's somewhere between 6 and 10 million.
Okay.
6 and 10. I mean, you can drive a truck down through that range.
I had read a stat that at one point there were about 200,000 people a month, and so
What does that come out to? I got to get my calculator.
I mean over 4 years.
What is that?
It's in the millions, definitely.
Well, it's
so
hold on. You said 200. So
I don't know that stat
48
to be 100%. So
No, I'm going to use your number because
Okay.
200,000
it's a general number.
times 40 months. Hold on. So 200,000
Yeah.
times 40 months. That's 8 million.
Okay.
Okay. Let's use that number. Let's use
Yeah.
8 million, which,
Yeah.
by the way, I never know, your sources, my sources. I think that one thing that I really like about you is you're able to reason. And if I feel like you call BS on things that you think are truly BS, and you're not necessarily beholden to your party
Definitely not.
at all. And I feel
No.
like you are not scared to disagree with your party or maybe somebody on your side. Like they're friends with you, you like them, you love them.
Yeah.
You guys are all voting the same way. But if they say something that you don't like, you're like, whoa, no, that's not even true. That's what I really like.
Well, yeah,
about
and
the way that
on that note, I have been personally, publicly to anyone that I have talked to about this election cycle for the last 4 or 5 months, I have been saying Biden needs to go. Biden is not the right candidate for the Democratic Party. Biden is not the right candidate for the American people, and he needs to go. And that upset a lot of people in my local party. They thought that I, therefore, was saying Trump should win or someone else should win or that I was going third party or whatever. But really what I was saying is that Biden has been largely ineffective and Biden clearly was not up to the task of defeating Donald Trump, and therefore was, in my mind, not up to the task of being president for another 4 years. And so there needed to be a new candidate. Obviously, that was the correct line of reasoning because there's a new candidate. And yeah, I mean, that again upset a lot of people in my party. But if it's true and I'm seeing something with my own eyes, I'm going to say what I'm seeing.
Do you think the media, I'm not talking about independent media like Muddy River or the thousands and thousands of independent media orgs that have popped up around the same time,
which
that
is
Muddy
a
River
great
has
thing,
too,
by the way.
which is amazing.
Awesome.
You know, like this is not Fox News.
Yeah.
And this is not MSNBC.
Yep, terrible. Both of them are terrible.
Yeah. So, and I agree with that. That's the reason why I don't watch them.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm getting Fox says that it's fair and balanced.
Fair and balanced.
Fair and balanced.
Yep.
And the truth of the matter is I can watch that, and even if I agree with a lot of the things that they're saying, the fact that I can't know exactly the facts because it's such an op-ed style of situation. Now, Fox News did have a hard news segment with Brett Baer that was unbelievable. Fox News' hard news segment is probably always head and shoulders better than MSNBC's hard news segment, probably. And I'm not trying to defend Fox because they're my friends. I'm telling you, I don't watch it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I happen to know in the past that if you take a look at the two, their hard news components back and forth, like Brett Baer, and who's that other guy? What were we going to say?
Yeah, no. Just to push back on that a little bit, Fox News did have to settle a lawsuit with Dominion voting machines for spreading false information about the 2020 election. They had to pay literally close to $1 billion to Dominion voting machines because they proved in court that Fox News continually lied and spread misinformation. And if that weren't the case, they probably would have provided some evidence and decided not to settle out of court. They would have taken it to court and shown some evidence that they were telling the truth, but they didn't do that. They settled near $1 billion. I think it was $850 million they paid Dominion voting machines because they lied about the 2020 election results over and over and over again. So I can't speak to their specific news segment with Baer or Chris Wallace or whoever, right? But I can say that they have been sued and settled for, again, close to $1 billion for spreading misinformation.
So let's assume that they did spread misinformation in there. Let's assume that they did. My question to you would be, do you think that the technology for voting is going in a good direction or a bad direction?
You know, that's such a nuanced question that I don't even know that I can answer it.
Can I get more specific then?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you know what ballot harvesting is?
Give me some more. Give me some more info.
Okay, let me just set the stage and then you can tell me that I'm right or wrong on it or somewhere in the middle.
I'll give you my opinion.
So there's this idea where people, for example, think the Electoral College should not be the be-all, end-all. We should go to a strict democracy by popular vote. So, for example, like Joe Biden last time got more popular votes than Donald Trump.
Yeah, a Republican actually has not gotten the popular vote since Ronald Reagan.
I might have to fact check you on that.
Yeah,
that might be true. That might be true. I don't have those facts in front of me.
Maybe Bush in 2004, but I don't even think that's true.
Yeah, we'll have to see. That might be true. Okay, I think there was some in there. So let's just put it to you this way. So you've got the votes where people say, when I cast my vote, I want that vote to count.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's good things and bad things with that. You would say, well, what's bad about it? The idea that casting your vote either on, do you remember the hanging Chad thing?
I do. I don't remember it, but I'm familiar with it. I wasn't even alive at that point.
Before you were born.
But
I remember it. It was Bush, Al Gore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And
I know what it is.
It was one of those things where I think Gore won the popular vote.
Gore won the popular
2000.
vote indisputably. Yes.
Won it. And then George Bush's brother was the governor
Of Florida.
Yeah, and it all came down to Florida.
Correct. And then it all came down to the Supreme Court, which George Bush's dad had appointed some of the Supreme Court justices that decided the case and declined Gore's petition to recount the ballots in Florida, which Gore lost by about 500 votes, which definitely at a presidential level calls for a recount.
Yeah, and maybe you can see where I'm heading with this. So this idea that in 2000, the oligarchy, that's still intact today, whoever the oligarchy of power shifts back and forth. It's not of the people, from
I'd largely
the people,
agree with that.
People. It's not we the people.
Yeah, I'd largely agree with that.
Like that. So that oligarchy pulled all the strings to force that kind of election. And I guess what I would say is today, the same thing's happening. The exact same thing is happening. Not the exact same thing. History doesn't necessarily repeat, but it rhymes, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is so with the votes, you've got everybody casting votes into machines.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, someday AI can take over these machines. We don't know if these machines are as reputable as like a hand counted paper ballot when someone's looking over and they're literally pressing a button and the machine goes, this is my number. And then you trust the machine. So I don't know if that's as good as if I'm counting paper ballots and you're looking over my shoulder and I'm going through this as an election judge and you are working together. Maybe I'm a Republican, maybe you're a Democrat or something. And we're working together and we shake hands and then we go out for coffee because we're election judges and we feel so strongly about a republic.
Yeah.
We just get along. We disagree about everything.
Yeah.
But you and I aren't going to cheat.
Right.
This is the holiest sacrosanct thing.
Yeah. I've served as an election judge. I know that exact thing.
So what I'm saying is in terms of voting, and I'm going to make the argument that voting mostly doesn't matter. And I think you can kind of be simpatico there because of the popular vote. I mean, if 81 million people vote for one candidate, but the other candidate wins, if one candidate gets more popular votes and they lose,
correct,
you could make the case that voting really doesn't matter that much. It doesn't matter.
I wouldn't make that case. I wouldn't make that case, but continue.
Okay. So I guess my original question was around the case that voting is very important.
Yeah.
Do you trust these machines? Do you trust ballot harvesting? Do you trust there's all of these people coming across the border, okay? And there's all of these issues with so in the last election, there's 5 states. I think it was Georgia and Pennsylvania and Michigan, Wisconsin. Remember Arizona? It was a complete mess. So Trump's up in these states. Then 3 or 4 in the morning, everybody said, not everybody, but a lot of people said, hey, listen, don't get all comfortable right now. We haven't counted the mail-in ballots yet.
Yeah, which is true.
Because right now we don't have a system to where election day is a national holiday where nobody works. I think that election day should be a national holiday.
Yeah, that's a fundamental flaw to our democracy.
When you and I aren't working, we go out and get lunch, even if you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican or vice versa. If I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican, you and I are going to be friends, and we're going to go vote in our separate polling booths. We're going to vote for 2 separate people. And we can do that because we're not going to have to work. It's a national holiday.
Yeah.
You don't need paper ballots. I'm sorry. You don't need mail-in ballots. You don't need machines. You don't need that. It needs to be a fundamental. It's like cash is king. Not my debit card, but cash. Private things, paper ballots. More of a transparent America.
Right. And I can't speak to the validity of specific voting machines. I can't say which technology is going to be best moving forward in regards to voting. I just don't have the knowledge on that to talk much about it. But what I can say is that...
You use your common sense.
In using my common sense, I could say that we have to move forward at some point, right? And
what does that mean?
It means that paper ballots are, almost certainly always going to be a thing, but the technology associated with counting ballots and determining who casts a vote for who is going to improve and is going to get better. And are there possible flaws within the current technology? Maybe. And if there are, people should look at that and people should sue Dominion voting machines as they did. Did you know that in the 2020 election cycle, Donald Trump's team had 60 separate court cases where he claimed that there was fraudulent election-related issues, right? There were votes that were invalid. The election was stolen from him. 60 separate times he was found to be incorrect. The judges did not side with him a single time, and he even took it to the Supreme Court, which he appointed 3 of the justices of, and unanimously each time they decided that they weren't even going to look at it because they provided no evidence to support that claim.
Okay.
So I don't think that there are fundamental flaws with our current voting process that would have resulted in any difference in the 2000 election or any election after that, 2020, 2022, right? These fraudulent election claims didn't happen in 2016 when Trump won, right? They only started happening when Trump lost because he's a whiner. And he lost an election fairly.
He definitely whines a lot.
Yeah.
So Hillary Clinton, though, I don't believe she ever conceded that election.
She did. She's conceded multiple times, and
did
she made a phone call to Trump that night conceding the election.
Did she really?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. You remember all of those states in the last election where all of those ballots were coming in?
Yeah.
There's a rumor that all of those were for Biden. Did you hear about that?
Well, that's just not true.
And do we have any proof?
I mean, the proof would be that the numbers at midnight were one thing, and the numbers at 6 a.m. when they counted the mail-in ballots were a different number, right? So Biden's numbers weren't the only ones that went up. His went up by a more significant margin because Donald Trump and his entire campaign team dissuaded people from using mail-in voting in 2019, 2020 while running for the presidency. So when you dissuade people from using mail-in ballots, less people who are voting for you are going to use mail-in ballots. That's common sense logic, right? So if he would have encouraged people who maybe didn't cast a ballot at all to just use a mail-in ballot, then he could have possibly won that election. It was very close, uncomfortably close.
Unbelievably close.
Yeah, 100%. And I anticipate this election will be.
I think it'll be close too.
Yeah.
I'm putting my money on Kamala.
I am too. I would put my money about 51% on Kamala right now.
51?
51.
I think that's a really safe percentage.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't want to go like 60.
I don't.
So even if Trump is polling 5 points ahead, and even if Trump wins the popular vote, which I don't think he's going to.
Trump will not win the popular vote.
I don't think anybody, anybody in the Republican Party on the national level in the Electoral College is going to win the popular vote in any.
Yeah, there's a quote from Donald Trump that if everyone voted, a Republican would never win again. And that's very much so true.
If everyone voted?
If everyone, that's a quote from Trump, that if everyone voted, a Republican would never win again. And that's why, in my opinion, Republicans make it harder and harder and harder for people to vote, because the less people that vote, the better their chances are.
How are they making it harder? Oh, you mean by not having paper ballot or mail-in ballots?
That's definitely not the only way. Like in
you're not
quote unquote red states.
You're not gonna say IDs, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So we have a governor, Governor Pritzker, right? Mm-hmm. He officially declared Election Day in Illinois to be a holiday. So state employees now, like we agreed earlier, get Election Day off so that they can make sure they have time to go and cast their votes. That doesn't happen in red states, right? Election purging, where they purge the list of voters who have not registered as recently, right? That happens at a much higher rate in red states. You have an extended period, like a grace period in Illinois. Illinois compared to Missouri is a great example. If I am not registered the day of the election in Missouri, I cannot cast a ballot. If I am not registered in Illinois, I can register the same day as the election to make sure that my voice is heard, because the elected representatives make sure that everyone has an opportunity to cast a ballot. Also, I can early vote much longer in blue states than I can red states, because in states where they don't make it a national holiday, or it's not a national holiday at all, it's not a national holiday, where they don't make it a state holiday, right? Then people who have jobs and work throughout those hours where you're allowed to vote just can't vote. So early voting is also crucial, because that gives people extended periods of time to be able to cast their ballot. All of these things that I'm talking about are expanded and protected in generally blue states, whereas they are restricted in more red states. So I would say that the elected officials in blue states are encouraging voting, whereas Republicans in red states generally are making it a little bit harder.
Well, I think one of the biggest problems with Republicans getting elected, generally speaking, especially in this election, is their inability to capitalize on the simplest things. Like, for example, if you're saying that, if Pritzker is going to allow everybody, all of the state employees to vote, I mean, if Pritzker thought that those state employees were all going to vote for Trump, if he really thought that, it would not be necessarily advantageous for him to do that. He still might do it due to his own perceived
sense of protecting and preserving democracy.
Yeah, just like integrity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it's a really wild thing. I mean, state employees a state employee is not going to vote against his or her own job, right? With those kinds of things, like, don't you think that like
that's not true.
But don't you think like, well, do you think it's at least 51%? Do you think at least 51%
No, I don't.
of state?
I think
Really?
that I definitely don't think that. In my experience working with teachers unions locally, they're just generally their members are going to support Republican candidates because of how red of an area we are. So whether or not Republican candidates support their jobs or attack their jobs isn't usually all that relevant. It's just people vote party line, a lot in this community, unfortunately.
How do we get people to not vote along party lines?
You start by making local elections nonpartisan, which is totally what I would have pushed for if I did get elected mayor, and was something myself and the Democratic nominee that I eventually lost to, Nora Baldner, were in favor of, whereas both the Republicans were not. And when you start asking questions about why, it's obviously because the Republicans have an advantage with an R next to their name, and the Democrats have a disadvantage with the D next to their name.
Yeah.
Whereas if there were nonpartisan elections where people actually had to run on positions and policy, then people would vote for those positions and policy rather than the D or the R.
Sure. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and what you see too is like during COVID, that was something to where I always used to say, I'm kind of going back and forth on it. I mean, since I don't have an R, I don't like the R's or the D's of what they're doing.
Oh, in large part, I do not either. In large part, I
really don't like what they're doing together and kind of apart. Some people say that you can kind of interchange the D's and the R's. They're kind of they're always kind of working together.
The uniparty?
Yeah, the uniparty.
Yeah.
They're kind of working together in the back rooms and stuff. And so I
would agree with that in large
they're
part.
Kind of shaking,
in certain situations, they are doing that. For instance, with we had talked a little bit about Bernie Sanders and his push to get money out of politics. That's something that the Republicans and Democrats both do not want.
Can you believe he said that last night?
I definitely can.
So for the listeners,
that's Bernie.
It is Bernie. But so last night at the DNC, for those who didn't see it, Bernie Sanders is independent from Vermont, or is he a D from Vermont?
He is an independent from Vermont.
Yeah, because the Democrats pushed him out pretty much. Right?
Well, he's always been an independent.
Okay, but
he ran for the Democratic presidential ticket, but he's always been an independent.
And got absolutely got steamrolled. I think, so last night, for those who didn't see it, he got up on stage at the DNC, and I'm not going to claim that I sat there and watched the DNC because I did not do that. I also don't sit there and watch the RNC because I can't stomach.
I've watched both, so.
I just can't watch it. I prefer to just watch the highlights and the clips of those kinds of things.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you miss that way, though.
Absolutely. But also, not really liking either party. It's like, I definitely know who I'm voting for this time.
Yeah.
Or like one party over another.
Right.
But generally, I don't.
Right.
Like, generally, my candidates do not win because I'm so libertarian. Mm-hmm. So I think we should own tanks. So I am not in a Mad Max way, but in like a joking way where I think we should have lots and lots and lots of freedom and lots of power in case a tyrannical government ever tries to steamroll us, which you see it happening all over the world, and it can happen here too, and it probably will happen here someday. But Bernie Sanders, he said, everybody needs to get money out of politics, especially primaries. And he said it, and he looked around and kind of shook his finger.
Yeah.
That's a baller thing to say.
It's totally, it's badass. It's badass.
It is badass.
And it's what we've been needing for Bernie for a minute. You know, Bernie has a perceived close relationship with Joe Biden. And so I think that in large part that has played into his unwillingness to criticize the Biden administration on crucial issues in the way that he should have been for the last 4 years. But I think he's been a little bit more apt to do that with Biden stepping out. I've noticed that in his speeches overall, he has just been a little bit more aggressive lately. And it's unfortunate that a friendship basically prevented him from doing that when it really counted. But I'm glad to see him doing it now. I do want to go back just a little bit. You were talking about like libertarianism and the freedoms and stuff. So we actually talked about like gun violence a lot in my sociology class today. And how it is a leading cause of death for children. It's a leading cause of death in the United States, period. And because
of suicides? Aren't suicides?
Just gun death in general is a leading cause of death. I can't...
Because humans are killing themselves, mostly.
I wouldn't say mostly. Well, humans are killing humans, yeah. And humans are killing themselves at a higher rate than normal.
Small children are getting a hold of very dangerous objects that are just kind of laying around because there's so many guns.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more guns than people.
Correct, which is unacceptable.
You think there should be one gun for every single, like an even number of guns?
No,
per person?
I think that a culture that is so obsessed with guns in the way that the United States culture is not healthy for anyone.
Well, that's true.
So,
that's true.
I think that like recognizing that guns are a dangerous and powerful weapon designed for killing is really important, and that gets glazed over in so many conversations about guns, right?
But real quick though, but the suicide part, I mean, the amount of mental illness is skyrocketing.
Right.
You take away the mental illness, that stat that you said, it's a leading cause of death, that goes away if you take away suicides.
I don't know that that's true.
I think it is.
Because
if you take away gang violence,
guns are a leading cause of death for children, and children usually commit suicide at a much lower rate than people 18 and above.
Why are small children dying from guns?
Because people who should not have guns are allowed to access guns. For example, right, there was a shooting in 2014 that killed 28 kids in Newtown, I want to say. It was Newtown.
Connecticut?
Yeah. And that was horrible, absolutely atrocious. And in Japan, in the same week, there was an attack on a school by a deranged person. But in Japan, guns are not accessible by civilians, which isn't what I'm arguing, just to be clear. But they're not accessible. There's about 1 to 5 gun deaths in Japan per year, which is wild, wildly low. But anyway, back to the point. Compare that 27 deaths by a mass shooter in a school in Newtown to the fact that in the same week in Japan, someone attacked a school with a knife and was only able to kill 3 or 4 kids, right? So there's always going to be mental health issues. That's not going away, and that's not new. What can be prevented is people who should not have access to dangerous and deadly weapons getting access to dangerous and deadly weapons like AR-15s and assault-style rifles.
Have you ever shot a gun?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
I was in Boy Scouts, so it's been a minute.
Yeah, the Boy Scouts, I mean, you definitely could shoot a gun or two. I mean, you could do that at Camp Ondasong, too.
Yeah,
like a Catholic youth camp.
I think that's where I did
Shawnee. Seriously?
I think so.
Yeah, so you're using like little 22 plinkers?
It was a rifle.
Yeah, 22.
Yeah.
22 long rifle. There's this idea where you've got, so you can walk. So this is a hypothetical for anybody listening, because I'm going to talk. So a lot of things that what you just said, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Like deranged, terrible people should not have guns.
And that's why we have to have red flag laws, and that's why we have to make sure people have background checks before they're accessing guns.
Both red flag laws and background checks, you have to be very specific and operationally define what that means, and I'll tell you why here in a second. So this is a hypothetical, and I don't want anybody to try this. I'm going to say something kind of loose and hyperbolic.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you have 2 9mm holstered, Okay. And you've got a 10-round mag. What does the state of Illinois allow for the maximum number of rounds inside a magazine?
I think that now it is 14 or 15.
Okay.
But I can't be 100% on that.
Let's say it's 7 or 10.
Okay.
Let's say 7 or 10. I'll say 10.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's less than 14. I think it's 10. But whatever. Let's just say it's 10, just because that's a lower number.
Okay.
And you have 5 or 6 magazines like in your pockets. Okay.
Yeah.
If and let's say you are not very good at shooting guns, but you know how to load a magazine, rack it, point, and pull the trigger, okay? With just regular, not fully automatic weapons, just one trigger pull releases a round, okay? The cartridge flies out, and the projectile goes forward. If you're in a situation like that, you can walk into, like, let's say that room, and we're doing target practice because the goal is to shoot paper targets, okay?
Yeah.
You've got 2 pistols.
Okay.
You can fire with 50 or 5 or 6 magazines on you. Pull them out.
Yeah.
You can shoot 50 to 60 rounds in a couple minutes.
Yeah, totally.
Okay?
Totally.
You can do that with an AR.
I think that you could shoot much more with an AR compared to a pistol. I think inarguably.
I will tell you this. If you're going to say that, with the pistol, I can only shoot 60 or 70 a couple of minutes, but with the AR, you can shoot 100.
Yeah.
If you're going to make that claim, I would say that is kind of an understandably reasonable margin of it's an increase.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, you can release if you've got 30 paper targets.
Yeah.
And you just want to hit those targets.
Yeah.
You can easily do that in 2 or 3 minutes. But if it's like a game where you're like, okay, I'm going to walk into that room and hit these paper targets, all of your rounds will be expired before anybody comes to try to stop you to hit those paper targets. It doesn't, anybody.
I would disagree. I would push back on that just for a second.
Go ahead.
Picture that you are in if you apply this logic to a school shooting, right, where in Illinois right now, let's say that a shooter got a gun legally, and it could only hold 10. Let's go with 10 rounds, right? And you've got 2 of them and 1 on your back. You have 30 rounds right there, and I'm sure you've got a bunch more ammo on you. But when those 30 rounds are gone, you have to reload. That gives people time to get out, get away, and get safe. Whereas if you have an AR-15 that can shoot 120 bullets in 1 minute because you have extended mags and a bump stock on it, you can take out 100 people in 1 magazine, right? So it does matter. It definitely matters, right? They're both not acceptable, but saving as many lives as possible should be the job of anyone in government.
So are you one of those gun guys that thinks that it's the gun?
No, it's
okay.
It's both, but I don't like the terminology, guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? Obviously, people kill people, but if you go back to my analogy between the United States and Japan, guns kill people at a much higher rate than other weapons and much more quickly and effectively than other weapons.
One of the reasons why we are a superpower, absolutely beating the crap out of Japan. So Japan is in serious crap right now. So there's an emperor of Japan.
Yep.
It's not a constitutional republic.
Yep.
And it's a little teeny tiny island. And they're all Japanese. They're all Japanese.
That's not true. They have immigrants just like any other country.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
People can immigrate to Japan, for sure.
I didn't say they couldn't. I'm saying they are Japanese. They're Japanese. It is a different culture.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And they're not allowed to have guns. And
Correct.
they don't have a constitution. And they don't have the freedoms that you and I have. And their currency is getting obliterated. There's it takes 144 Japanese yen to make $1. Their fertility rate is like 0.9. They are plummeting. They're going down. They're losing everything. So I understand. I do respect the argument about how Japan. Listen.
It doesn't have to be Japan. The
Japan,
reason I use that example is because within the same week, there is a specific example
It's a
of
great example.
a mass murder happening in Japan compared to the United States, where a deranged lunatic was killing children.
It's a great example because it shows like how completely different those societies are. Like in Japan, you can't even look people in the eye. There's no shaking hands. It's like
I can't speak to Japanese culture.
I'm just use Japan. So if you were to use Switzerland or Sweden, like if you're going to talk about like Anglospheres in Europe of like Denmark,
right,
where they've got like 5 million people,
right,
but we have 340 million people. It's funny because it's funny, not funny, but like America is this Wild West.
Yep.
If you want to say that like people in America have some type of derangement and fascination and obsession over firearms, unhealthy. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. We were talking about your mom and your grandma, and I'm going to tell you about my parents.
Go ahead.
My parents are listening. I'm sorry for using you guys as an example. You know what they love?
What's up?
They love like primetime television.
Okay.
They love NYPD Blue, CSI.
Yeah.
You know what they're doing the whole time? If you are a boomer, okay, if you're a boomer and you're listening to this, you know what you love? You love watching primetime television. Listen, I'm gonna play into your cards here because I'm going to kind of show you how I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
You've got my parents, your people, everybody. They are watching primetime television.
Right.
And there's guns everywhere. They want to watch the courtroom dramas. They want to hear about the blood. They want to hear about the killing. They want to hear these boomers, okay? And like, I'm Gen X. What are you, millennial?
I am Gen Z.
You're a Zoomer?
I am.
God love you. So these people that I'm talking about, they want to hear about the guns and the blood, and they can't wait till the coroner. They can't wait till the detectives get into the morgue and they take the body and they pull the sheet back. And there's the dead person riddled with bullets. And the camera pans on it for just a second.
Yeah.
Listen, you know what the kids like? So those are just our grandparents.
Right.
They're fascinated with the violence and
or
the
the
blood
true crime
and
stuff,
the guns.
Dateline.
It's all about guns.
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
so
murder or killing. Yeah, all that
murder,
stuff is.
kill, murder, kill.
Yeah.
You want to know why Americans are so fascinated?
Tell me your opinion here.
This is what I'm saying. So that's like, these are the older generations.
Okay.
I mean, their parents' lived through the Wild West. I mean, they were all, you see all the Wild West movies. People love the Wild West movies.
Yeah.
Guess what Wild West movies are about? The old Wild West.
Yep.
Duels.
Yep.
It's all about guns,
Yep.
pistols. So this is what kind of America is built on, is this
Yeah.
radical free. You know what the kids like?
Tell me.
You know what the kids like?
You tell me.
You got a controller. Do you ever play video games?
I do. I play video games for
Do you
sure.
ever play those? Do you ever play shooters?
I play Overwatch, which is technically considered a shooter.
Is it a gun?
Some of them have guns.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have you ever played a video game where you push the button and the bullet goes through, and when you get a headshot, the controller vibrates? Have you ever witnessed that?
Yeah.
How good does it feel when you see the head splatter and the blood go against the wall? And like how? Tell me about the drug addiction you have, your dopamine addiction you have. Not you, the proverbial you, the royal you. These people, you want to talk about how I don't let my kids watch anything with guns. I don't let my kids even play with water guns, hardly.
Yeah.
When they play with water guns, they have to shoot at targets, and they have to have muzzle awareness, finger off the trigger, and I go, don't point the water gun at anybody. I don't even let my kids shoot water guns at each other. You know why? Because then they'll shoot BB guns, then they'll shoot other things, and then all of a sudden we're building a culture of it's okay.
Yeah,
it's just like
it's really what it's doing is socializing, especially young men, to be comfortable with guns.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you were playing that video game, and the controller vibrated, when you made your kill, did you feel bad or did you feel good?
I mean, I was probably winning, so probably good.
I'm just asking you how it made you feel. Did you feel remorse or did you feel great?
I mean, it's an animated game where I was probably shooting at a gorilla that could talk.
No.
So,
listen, Grand Theft Auto, pulling hookers out of out of old cars and beating them with chairs.
Right.
Listen, we live in a violent society.
We do.
And this is the society we live in. And that is we probably need to change our frame of reference before we start messing with the Second Amendment. Because I'll tell you why.
Well, and I'm not arguing that we should change the Second Amendment, but
and then we're going to get to local housing.
But the Second Amendment does specifically call for a well-regulated militia, means that...
let's build some militias then.
Well, and if that's your suggestion, then that's something to explore. But the key word there for me is regulation. The founding fathers, a well-regulated militia, not just a militia, a well-regulated militia, because the founding fathers didn't just say that anyone should have a gun anytime. They said that we should have well-regulated militias to fight back against governmental tyranny. There's not governmental tyranny happening right now. Some would argue that there is a level of that. But in the way that it was happening in 1776, right? It's not happening. We're not having war on our streets. We're not having British soldiers staying in our homes without permission. Like, it's not the same thing. So the founding fathers called for regulation because they understood that you're working with dangerous firearms. And at that point, they were much less dangerous than they are now. We have adapted and updated our Constitution many times. There's 21, 22, 23, somewhere in there, amendments, right? So every one of those...
26?
Whatever the number is, it's a high number. And that's because we adapt as people to our new environments, and we need to do that in every part of our Constitution. We need to eliminate the Electoral College, which was built to essentially help slave-owning farmers in southern states. We need to change the Second Amendment so that people understand that it's a well-regulated militia. We have to have regulation on guns. Like, you're a self-purported libertarian, right? I would ask you, do you think that people should have access to nuclear codes anytime that they want? Because
No.
Otherwise, that's regulation of firearms.
Nuclear codes, no. ARs, yes.
Okay. Well, I would...
I draw the line somewhere.
Well, if
it's kind of like this. It's like this. I really like to box.
Yeah.
But I don't think I should go walk up to a stranger and start boxing and hitting them in the face. It's like, well, hold on. So you said you like to box. It's like there is some level of hyperbole. I will say this. You are going to get your wish. People are going to start building militias to adhere to your philosophy. There are going to be militias over time, over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years.
That will be regulated by the government would be my wish, because that's what the actual founding fathers called for, was a well-regulated militia. Not just a militia that does whatever it wants, whenever it wants, and forms. That's called a militant group, and we already have those, like the Proud Boys, and they are dangerous and violent extremists. But if the government decided that they would like well-regulated militias in communities to serve and protect their people, that's perfectly acceptable.
You are going to get your wish, because there are 3,200 counties in the United States, and out of those 3,200 counties, the vast majority of them in all of those red areas, they are constitutional sheriffs, and they will deputize small towns, medium-sized towns. They will put out proclamations and say, hey, I am putting together a well-regulated militia, because Brennan wants to change the 2A, so we can't change the 2A because you have to have a constitutional convention to do that. We're not going to do that. So I'm going to put together a well-regulated militia, and everyone is invited to come, and you will have millions and millions and millions and millions of people locked and loaded, ready to defend 2A. You get the last word. And then we'll talk about local housing.
I mean, that's like a extreme hyperbole of what I'm arguing. So, okay. I mean, that's not really where I would anticipate that would go. I'm saying
that is going to happen.
I would disagree with you, and I would say that the federal government and state and most local governments would not be in favor of that, and the vast majority of the American people would probably not be in favor of that. So that would not be a very democratic thing to do.
It would be constitutional, though.
It depends on how it was done, because the federal government does have the overruling authority over local governments, local sheriffs, and if the federal government declares a law, then local municipalities and state governments do have to adhere to that.
It's not going to go down like that. The feds will not be able to. The feds will not be able to go into the states and into the counties and override the local sheriffs, and you will have so many people. Here's the problem, and I lied to that, said that you get the last word, but you will get the last word here in a second. The feds, when you say the feds will come in, the feds will come in, let them, come and take it. Come and take it, because anybody who is trying to take that away, that is a fight that is so, it's like the worst move you could do.
Yeah, no one's coming for your guns, though. That's just like totally not happening.
Do you promise?
I promise I'm not coming for your guns.
Do you promise no one's coming for ARs? When you say they're not coming for the guns, and then they go, by the way, listen, if you had 10 guns and 2 of them were ARs, and 8 of them were not ARs,
right,
and then I go, no one's coming for your guns, and then you believe me, and then I go, give me your guns, you're going to say, you said you weren't coming for my guns, and then I go, yeah, but I'm not talking about these 2, and I rip them out of your hands. I'm just telling you. You are a truthful person.
Then I guess I should reword that.
I'd recalibrate that.
I would say that nobody is coming for your constitutional right to bear arms. No one is coming for that.
Well, then what about background checks and red flag laws?
You lose constitutional rights when you violate laws or when you are unfit to mentally have a gun. I mean, people in jail don't just get what they want. People who are felons have to adhere to specific rules, right? You lose constitutional freedoms when you violate the Constitution or when you are mentally unwell. That's just the way it goes. So if you're arguing that people who break the law should just still be able to do whatever they want, that's an argument, but it's a poor argument.
Who would make a ridiculous argument like that? What I would say is this. Do you think people who are on SSRIs should be able to own firearms? Do you think people who are on... So SSRIs are medications that people give to the mentally ill. When you have a bacterial infection, they give you medication like an antibiotic to take care of the physical illness. When doctors prescribe SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, they are prescribing those medications because that person has a mental illness. It could be depression, maybe their dad died, maybe their grandma died, and they're like really, really depressed, supposedly. So they're like, you know what? We're going to give you these pills to make you happy. Don't go to the gym. Don't go to the gym and like pick up heavy crap and put it back down again. Just take these pills, which, by the way, severely alters your brain chemistry.
Yeah.
Those mentally ill people. I've been on SSRI.
Okay.
I've been on one.
Okay.
Not on any right now, but
Okay.
like some doctor thought I should be on one. Well,
Okay.
he was wrong. Okay.
Yeah, well.
And you know what happens when you're on an SSRI? Zoloft, Lexapro, all
Yeah,
of these
yeah.
things. I mean, any kind of like Valium.
Yeah.
Valium is not an SSRI. It's a benzo. But the idea that I would just ask you, do you think, this is like putting you on the hook here, like be careful. Do you think people who have ever been prescribed an SSRI, which by the way, state of Illinois, there are Democrats in the state that would love this legislation to pass. And people are going to crowd in the comments, no, you're making that up. No, I'm saying background
Can you name
checks,
specific legislators who are doing that?
I can't think of their names, but I know that there are people in Illinois in power. So first of all, there are people in power in Illinois that really want to take the guns. I will tell
I'm
you
not
this.
aware of any of those people.
Do you think that somebody who has ever been prescribed an SSRI should have a firearm?
I don't know enough about that specific medication or the specific people who it's being prescribed to really answer that question.
I will tell you this.
But I do know that
go ahead.
people who have diagnosed mental disorders, whether that be depression, whatever, I mean, there should be some limitation there, definitely. If you are severely depressed, then you are statistically more likely to commit a crime with a gun or to commit suicide. I mean, people who are severely depressed should not just be given guns. Do you know that in certain states right now, there are grocery stores that have ammo vending machines in them? We as a society keep normalizing everyone having a gun all of the time. Guns are okay. You should be okay with guns. And what that leads to, again, it's perceived as a masculine thing. It's perceived as a show of strength to have a gun. And so lots of men, that's the number one thing that men commit suicide with is guns, because it's normalized that men should have guns all of the time. So when men who are depressed, like severely, get guns, yeah, they're more likely to commit suicide with a gun. And that's why women try suicide more often than men, but men are more successful because of the methods they use, right? The methods they use are guns. Guns should not be in mentally unwell people's hands. Guns should not be in criminals' hands. There are many guns that should not be in civilian hands. There are many guns that were designed for military usage that should be used in the military because they're designed specifically to shred people. That's that.
Thank goodness we got rid of fully automatic weapons, right? Thank goodness they're gone. Hey, one of the things that I really like, you have a platform of local housing. Mm-hmm. And I read through some of the things that you want to do, and a lot of it is, much of it, I think it's an admirable thing.
Yeah.
And I like that this is your passion. This is I think you've had other passions in the past, and I'm guessing you'll have, but this is your big one.
Yeah.
As
far as local politics go, I have been focused on housing since I ran for mayor. I was bringing up housing issues in a mayoral forum prior to any of the adults in the room doing so. Still, to this day,
I agree with that.
The mayoral candidates that are announced right now are not talking about the issue. They're not even bringing it up. And we started this podcast a minute ago now, and one of the first things I said was that you have to speak truth to power. Mm-hmm. And not a single elected representative in city government right now is fighting to make sure that every home in this city is safe to live in. They're just not. They are just not doing that.
Right.
And that's unacceptable.
I can see that.
So I am a part of a group right now called QRILE. It stands for Quincyans for Registration, Inspection, Licensing, Enactment. And what we're trying to do is require a registration of every rental unit with the city so that the city knows which homes are being used for rental, which homes are being used for profit. Inspection to make sure that every home that is being used for a profit is up to city code. There is already established a city code for housing units, and licensing to make sure that when they are approved and inspected, that they are served with a license to operate a business, which is exactly what a rental is. Mm-hmm. Every other business in town has to register with the city, has to pay fees, et cetera, and rentals are the only exemption to that I'm aware of. And that's not really acceptable to me, because what happens when you do that is bad landlords are allowed to deteriorate properties over many years, and then what happens to those properties are they get put on the fix or flatten list, and then city taxpayers spend thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to demolish housing units that should have been kept up to city code 20 years prior. But there's no enforcement of the city code, and therefore that does not happen. And so people who are good landlords or are good homeowners or good renters who live next to a blighted property that's infested with raccoons or has raw sewage in its basement, et cetera, are being impacted by that. Not only that, but the people who are living in houses like that, there literally are people in this city right now that lived in a house that had a bedroom that was padlocked and nailed shut because that's the room the raccoons lived in. There are houses in this town right now that people live in that are upheld its entire structure by a car jack. And in that basement, it is covered in raw sewage. That's not acceptable, and the city allows it to happen over and over and over again without stepping in because they don't want to be big government, right? So the government has a duty and a responsibility to protect and serve its citizens, and when you do not do that, you are failing as a government.
Would you be okay? So I own some units.
Yeah.
And
for the record, I'm not. This is not a anti-landlord spiel. I have many family members that are landlords. This is an anti-slumlord spiel.
So do you think there's any benefit? So I would prefer like, that QRILE, that is
Yeah.
a good, I like that acronym, that acronym. It's good. One of the things that kind of bothers me about more legislation about that, I did not disagree with anything that you just said. One thing that like maybe in your pursuit, and this is just kind of my opinion, you can kind of take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Because I do think what you're after is a respectable thing of kind of a respectable ideal of
Yeah.
what you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
You're saying things like people should not be living in raw sewage. I'm like, okay, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you're right, of course, unless I want to. I'm kidding. But so like I've got units, okay, and I'm not a slumlord, okay, and
I'll take your word.
well, I'm not. You can go through any of my units. I've got units right here,
Heard.
and they're not slums.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Not even close.
Gotcha.
Nobody is gonna rent there.
Yeah.
If it was a slum, they just wouldn't do it.
Right.
Now I do know of some slumlords in
Yeah.
town.
So do I.
And we don't need to trade names,
Nope.
but I know how they keep things, and I think it's despicable.
It is.
And I don't like what they're doing. And the worst part about those slumlords is that when their tenant calls in like a meek voice and says things like, "Hi, I just want to let you know the oven hasn't worked for 2 months.
Yeah.
And I tried to plug in a new oven because somebody gifted me one for Christmas. It barely works, but I have to light it with a lighter." And I have to always, because the pilot light's not, you
Right.
always have to reset the pilot light. I mean, the damn house can explode.
Yeah.
Okay, over this.
Yeah.
But like I'm
It's a
plugging
reality
this,
in Quincy.
I'm trying to get this done. Will you just come over and please help me? And the slumlord's like, listen, I'm not doing that.
Yep.
Like you're only paying $400 in rent. Like that's not enough.
Yeah.
Like it's going to cost me $250 to fix this.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to fix it. Okay.
Correct.
Do you think that you can? Is there in the legislation? Do you think there's anything that you can do since you're kind of spearheading this thing, in starting at the bottom and working your way up, like at the worst places, and work your way up to the best places that are like Taj Mahals? Because I'll tell you right now, the idea that like this is one thing that bothers me with government.
Yeah.
They see bad actors
Okay.
and they go after everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's
I like to hear the pushback. On why I have to be overly regulated.
yeah, but you're not being overly regulated is the thing.
with this
legislation, you are not being overly regulated.
What is the
So
regulation?
the regulations again call for registration, licensing, and inspection. That's exactly what it calls for. Registration meaning again that you just have to list yourself, and if you as an owner live within 50 miles of the city, then just yourself will work. But if you live outside of the 50-mile radius of Quincy, then you have to identify an agent within Quincy to make sure that the city can contact someone when there are things wrong with your property. Or for instance, when it burns down. There's a house that I'm aware of right now in Quincy that was owned by an LLC, okay? The owner of the LLC died, so now there's no owner of that property. The tenants had signed leases with that owner saying that the owner would pay for their water bill. It was part of their rent. They continued to pay their rent, and their water was still shut off because their owner is dead. So when the city goes to find the owner and finds out they're dead, their hands are tied because there is no agent associated with that rental property. So that's one giant improvement, is that LLCs and corporations that own property in Quincy have to be, actually responsible for the properties that they're going to rent out in Quincy. So then you get to the inspection portion, which again, every other business in the community has to be inspected to make sure that it's up to code, right? If you run a bakery, if you run an ice cream shop, the health inspectors come to make sure that it's up to code. The city inspectors are just coming to make sure that the unit you are renting, again, making a profit off of, is livable and up to code. And what our regulations call for are then for that to be graded depending on how many violations you have. Say, for instance, if you have 0 violations, you would get an A. And if you have 5, then you'd get a C, right? Then you're going to be inspected more often if you get a C than if you get an A. and you're going to pay more if you get a C than if you get an A.
How much are you? So how much are these people paying?
It just depends on the actual grade requirement.
Give an example. Like let's say.
Let's say $100 a year for people who get a C, and $100 every 3 years for people who get an A. That breaks down to $33 per year for people who get an A, or less than $2.80 a month. And that is a significantly larger number for people who have housing code violations, essentially letting people live in unsafe and unfit housing, right? So that's one part of it. And then those grades also get publicly listed so that when people are looking for rental housing, they know who is a good actor and who is a bad actor. So that's a huge plus there. And then licensing is just saying that you have a license to rent places out. I went to Boston last year, and one of the very first things I noticed in my Airbnb was that they were required to have a short-term rental license, because every home in Boston that someone is living in, even for short-term, is required to be licensed by the city to make sure that it is livable and up to code. I'm not calling for Airbnbs and et cetera, to be like heavily inspected or whatever.
Well, they already have their own policing system.
Meh.
Airbnb? Are you kidding me? They've got all the reviews and they've got the grades
Right.
and
My parents are Airbnb. They have an Airbnb. I get the process, but.
Well, what percentage of Airbnbs that people are like going and like paying $500, $800,000?
I've stayed in some pretty shitty Airbnbs
that are in code violation.
They would be. I have at least stayed in one that would have definitely been a violation of Quincy city code. Yeah, I have.
What was the problem?
There was exposed bare wiring near one of the light switches. There was also the drainage in one of the bathrooms did not work correctly, so the sink would overflow often if you ran it for more than 30 seconds.
And how much should those people be fined?
I don't think they should be fined specifically for those issues, but that if those were the only two issues in a home, then what would happen is the city inspector would say, these are the two issues you need to fix them, and you get a B because you had less than 5 code violations, so you're going to pay $100 every 2 years, and you're going to be not inspected again for another 2 years because you got a B. You're a pretty good landlord. Just take care of these issues.
Do you rent or own?
I rent.
Do you live in Quincy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's the state of your apartment? You don't have to give addresses or the name of your landlord. But what's the current state of your unit?
Livable and up to code.
So A.
A.
Okay. Do you mind? Okay. I don't want to ask too many personal questions.
Yeah.
My last question to you is, how do you feel about in inflationary times? So I've had to raise the rent of some of our units.
Right.
Okay. I did not want to at all.
Yep.
It's not fun at all. Like insurance is flying up. Like labor rates are flying up. Things are very, very expensive.
Totally acknowledge that.
Do you in this legislation or this idea? Are there any kind of like weird, like artificial, like rent caps where you're not allowed to rent? Okay, good.
There is not a single rent cap, and I would say that for people who are arguing, that maybe
So you really truly are doing like kind of like what you view as like a bare minimum. This has to happen because this is ethical to do it the right way.
100%. I just really think that people should be living in safe housing, period. I don't want to overly look into landlords' history or whatever.
You're not trying to be like San Francisco people, right?
I'm not.
Like all the squatter stuff.
I'm not at all.
Okay.
Really, all I'm saying is that no one in our city or in this country, in our modern world, the richest country in the history of the world, should be living in unsafe housing, period.
Right. They should not.
And they are in Quincy, and that's being enabled by Quincy's government refusing to act on the issue.
Well, I want to I admire you for doing that. I think you're doing a good job there.
Check out q-rile.org if you want to find out more.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much. So much for
Thank you
coming
for having
on.
me.
Do you want to come on again sometime?
I'd be happy to.
All right. We can talk about a lot more stuff.
We didn't even get into Medicare for All.
Oh, dude! Now we're going. No, okay, yeah. We can get into Medicare.
Yeah,
for
anytime.
all.
Anytime.
Speaking of Bernie Sanders, but hey, thanks for doing that Pink Whitney with me. Which everyone, just so you know, it was a drink.
It was
It was a drink that you can buy at Hy-Vee Wine and Spirits for like a couple bucks. That's the Pink Whitney I'm talking about.
Yes.
My goodness, people get the wrong impression.
These
They have
days.
no idea. I can't just say,
Yep.
It wasn't one of those pills with like the Mercedes symbol on it.
Negative.
No, that's like before you were born.
Yeah,
That
I
was
don't even
back
know
when,
what you're talking
You
about.
don't even know what I'm talking about.
No.
Brennan Hills.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
me.
buddy. See ya.